Hello, welcome on to all of you to our webinar today on the how to avoid unnecessary pitfalls in internationalization, a legal and strategic perspective. Thanks that you found your way here. And without further delay, we'll go to the webinar. So what we will do, short introduction about the participant companies, and we'll go shortly through a strategic perspective, legal perspective, and we will finally have a short Q&A so we can have some words and some comments on the discussed topics. So just as an introduction, I think we'll do a short round through the speakers, and then we will pass on to the content. And of course, in the Q&A session, of course, whenever you ask a question, you can also briefly introduce yourself. So today, 1IB is active supporting its customers in international B2B partnering. Basically, what we do is we support our companies in preparing documentation that they need in order to start a market entry, to then find which could be the relevant business partners in the market, to do some strategic shortlisting of which companies shall be approached in this partnering process. And then whatever we do in a competitive and time-driven engagement, so that we can validate your ideas in the final target market, see how they are received there by the local companies, and then hopefully find the best company to negotiate with and to close commercial agreements with. So basically my colleague Tobias, fitting to the topic, he's traveling in Latin America for international business topics, and he had some technical problems, so I will go through his part today. As we all know from business travel, sometimes things can occur whenever you are out, and so today we will just be Johannes, myself. So I would also briefly ask Johannes to introduce himself, and then we will start with the strategic perspective.
Sure. Thank you, Mario, and thanks for inviting me to this webinar today. My name is Johannes Brand. I'm partner in Buse. We are a full-service law firm based in Germany, and we have 7 offices in Germany. I am based in Düsseldorf. 8 other offices are located in all parts of the world. I specialize in corporate and commercial law, especially cross-border commercial law, and I advise B2B clients in all kinds of commercial and corporate endeavors, and interlayer also the market entries in Germany, inbound, but then also outbound in all other parts of the world. That's me. Back to you, Mario.
Thanks, Johannes. So myself, I'm the CEO and founder of 1IB International Business, and I'm looking forward to discuss with you later on. So about the strategic perspective of international business. So just wanted to briefly talk about these 2 gentlemen. One is Michael Porter and the other one is Henry Mintzberg. So for instance, Michael Porter, for him, the strategy is choosing a unique and valuable position, rooted in systems and activities that are much more difficult to match. And so in the end, for him, the starting point is that you define your how to be unique and how to deliver your unique value to the customers. So basically for him, strategy in a nutshell is based on understanding competition. Whilst for Henry Mintzberg, that for him, the strategic planning is about your own analysis. So basically breaking down your goals into smaller steps And this includes his famous 5P plan. So the 5 Ps is so to plan, to analyze before, then to ploy, getting ahead of competitors by innovation, scenario thinking, patterns. So looking at your past historical organizational behavior in order to bring up strategic patterns for your further plans. And then basically position the organization's position in the market. What is your competitive advantage, cost leadership, innovation leader, and the perspective, including the view of key stakeholders on the company, and also what employees think about management, what investors think about the company, to widen this perspective. So basically what efficient strategy is always multi-layered and needs different approaches. So we will dive into this in a moment. Basically what we want to do is to come from today's company situation to a desired future. And the strategy we want to elaborate also in international business is the way our travel to get there. Some small points that we always hear, or that we oftentimes hear in international business projects. We can do it all on our own. We have all the internal resources. So yes, most probably companies have, whilst in a small and mid-sized companies, I think it's always more likely that you would do some unnecessary mistakes on the way, because always there is companies which already have done these mistakes, and market players which have further experience. So I think a point wherever in internationalization strategy is always the benchmarking. An important part is the benchmarking with other companies, and basically it's always nice to learn from others in order to avoid these mistakes. So a lot of companies always do a market study, and whenever this market study is done, they say, okay, now we're ready to enter the market. However, so the study and the real world life sometimes are different. I think we always have to find a way how to go from theory into practice. And the final decision of a market entry shall not be taken only based on a market study. I think there's always the need for a solid validation, to do some expert interviews in the final target market with different stakeholders, which will be involved in marketing of this product, in order to see if this makes sense. Of course, also you can plan a physical visit or round trip in order to meet relevant stakeholders to validate your idea. Market study is a good starting point, whilst the real world validation in discussions always brings up points which are difficult to find in a desk research. Also point, of course, a lot of small, medium-sized enterprises which are market leader in their specific product. So I said, okay, we're a market leader. We have to think big by entering 5 markets at the same time. Speed, of course, in business is always nice. However, internationalization always brings complexity, costs money, will bring high budgets to your company. And of course, there might be also if you try to do too many things at the same time, it might bring downturns to your company, so that you're not able to deliver then these projects, and they end up in a failure, which would have been avoidable if you would have done things in the right order. So there's always good to find companies with markets which you can group in similar rules like Austria, Switzerland, Germany, which have the same language and have similar business patterns, whilst of course, even in this example with Switzerland being out of the European Union, inside the European Economic area, even there you will find a lot of different perspectives on business. So however, so you might find some similar patterns in business behavior. Also, if you go to south of Europe, Portugal and Spain, even having different languages, they might have quite similar rules in doing business. So our focus lies 100% on sales, raising the numbers. I think, of course, we all want to grow, and whilst international business is also you have to think in the long run. So first of all, you have to build up your reputation. You have to build up a solid, you or your partner, you have to build up a solid after-sales service customer experience in the market in order to create your great reputation. So whenever you impose your strategy on international business, I think you first have to take the time and in order to build up a team, adjust your products, offerings and services to the local market, take time to validate all that in the local market, and then in the long run have success. So I think it's not the same taking your assumptions from your home market than going to the international market. So I think also companies saying, okay, we do not have to adjust our products for international markets. I think all of the products, all international markets work differently, have different distribution channels, have different customers' perspectives. So I think the one for you know some famous translation mistakes. The one of you who knows Spanish, like the Mitsubishi Pajero, so I think you know what it means for the one of you speaking Latin American Spanish. So I think just some simple rules that never underestimate that you might have to do changes in your product. So the strategy that you choose for your international marketing always might include also some adaptations to or localization of your product. Basically, a small resume on the process. Starting point is usually some desktop research, as we said, some building up some market report and bringing up some SWOT analysis of your international market. So this in the second step comes into the market study, where you include, I think very importantly, expert interviews. So never take a decision just based on paperwork. Always speak to local people and try to understand how the local market is behaving. Third point, whenever you have a certain confidence that you want to enter this market, also try to organize a visit. I think all of us, we are now getting used, especially after COVID, to the convenience of Teams meetings, but you will always just see how your product will be sold in a shop, in a local market, your services, how they will be sold by local people, if you see how this works locally. So I think this is very important to make the investment of time and money to go there and see how things behave on a local scale. This will also give you the possibility to present all this to the final key decision makers. Not all of them you can, not with all of them you can speak via Teams, whatever. So you have to be there. You have to meet the senior management of your business partners. You have to meet some key decision makers in the market. This all will be possible whenever you go there. Yeah. So whenever you take the decision, also take into the account that a negative decision is also a valid decision. So sometimes you have big plans. Sometimes a market seems viable from the beginning. You have a nice plan in hand. The business numbers looks promising, and then you visit the country. You see that for several reasons this will not work properly. And so sometimes you also have to take a step back and do not do the mistake and force things which perhaps will not work. So I think very important in international business, investments are quite high, the time dedication is quite high, and sometimes we tend, whenever we're already far down the line in the process, to say, okay, now we know that's not perfect, but however, still we will do it. Sometimes perhaps in international business, it's not the best strategy. So perhaps sometimes then reconsidering and finding some other markets which fit better to your product will be the wiser decision. Yeah, and of course, like in all business, whenever you have the green lights or everything has to be measured, sometimes in international business, the KPIs are not that easy to define, and sometimes the numbers are just in hands of your distributors, of your local partners. So make sure to bring up a plan that you can measure your business performance in the market properly, and you see on a timely basis how your business is performing, and do not have the problem in the long run that you are without data for a long period of time, and then in the end you're seeing that things are not behaving as they should. So normally, sometimes in international business, we just ship, if it is a physical product, we ship once a year or even every second year a high amount of product, and we do not really see how this is behaving in the market. So we also have to see how the stock at the distributor is performing. So are they just keeping our product in the stock, and after 2 years they are returning all the product to us? So make sure to measure properly how this is, how your product is handled in the market. Yeah, so I think alternative option, perhaps interesting idea. Instead of entering into your final target market directly, look for a smaller market which you can use as a test balloon. So sometimes it's not like if you're already ruining your final market by doing the learnings that the necessary learnings, perhaps it's not the best way to do it. Perhaps you search for a small market where you with lower investment and lower manpower, you can evaluate how your experience is, and then finally with these learnings go to your final market, because then you fail cheap somehow in the smaller market. You make all the learnings, it isn't a high investment, even if you have to leave this market later on again because you burnt your brand reputation somehow, is not that important. So you just make the learnings there, and then you go to the final market with all the validated plans in action. So, and also I think it's always nice to gain confidence and to see how your processes are also working in international business if you have not done international business before, and then you see how things behave, and then you go with a clearer strategy, validated strategy into your final target market. Yeah, so just summarizing briefly, what are the main points here? So lack of access to know-how. Common way to solve this, of course, is outsourcing. In most international markets, you will find the right service providers, the right business partners in order to go forward, and you can focus on your core business. So that's why it's so important to validate briefly which market to go to, which are the partnerships that you need in order to run your business model, and then find suitable and reliable business partners which then help you to overcome this lack of access to know-how. Local restrictions, also a way business partnering could help. You could, of course, have your patents at risk, your intellectual property. So you have to make sure that you have a local persons that see that patents, licenses are okay. That you have perhaps in China, of course, you need a Chinese joint venture partner if you want to go there. If you have heavy investment costs, of course, you need a local partner to oversee this and go there. And this local partner normally are already familiar with the culture, and they can help you in order to not start from the scratch, basically. So these high investment needed limited resources. So basically, you also need to find your local partners in an intelligent way that are perhaps willing to co-invest into your business. I've seen, for instance, a business which local manufacturer co-invested in setting up the structures in the local market in order to, as they saw a big opportunity, and then in the end they put some price, some additional price on the transfer price in order to refinance this investment. So both, it's been a win-win situation, and they earned more in the manufacturing, in the local manufacturing, whilst they enabled the business in the first place, because they took the investment in order to build the local manufacturing plant. Intercultural companies is, of course, very important in international business. Don't have to tell you that things are slightly different and people do not understand the same part. Even inside Europe, I've lived also some years in Spain, even between Spain and Germany. So whilst in Germany, we are quite straightforward, focusing on the challenging parts of a negotiation. Whenever all the point is solved in Southern Europe, you still need some time to go into the common points which are already solved in order to gain the confidence. And then just after half an hour of discussion, you can start up with the challenging points. Whilst in Germany, we are much more straight to the point, and then start after 5 minutes already going into directly into the negotiation. Difficult sometimes to make this work. Make sure that you're also properly advised there in order to make this. All this, I think, of course, whenever you have the right partners at hand for business partners, you can focus on your core business. So, of course, your core business is make it happen that your product, your service is sold more in a final target market, and all the rest can be done with good selection of business partners. This will speed up the process of your market entry, and this will also, of course, minimize the risks, because your local partners will be your validation partners. They can tell you this will be working, this will not be working. So you can focus on really the things which will be working. So highly recommended to not try to do everything on your own, to try to find local business partners which are able to support you in implementing your strategy in an international market. And with this, I would like to hand over to Johannes, who will show his part of the
legal perspective, and I will try to add some more insights from my legal perspective, from my perspective of a lawyer who specializes in cross-border commercial cases. First of all, I think that we need to be a little more precise about the term internationalization, because, as you know, there's this term that lawyers always use: it depends, and everything depends from what we actually speak about. So if we speak about internationalization, it could be simply sales, cross-border sales from Germany to another country, or from another country to Germany. That is not the type of internationalization we want to talk about today. We could talk about cross-border procurement, purchasing of goods from other countries. It could also be the cross-border subcontracting, partnership, or joint ventures that we talked about before. And if we want to talk about the legal perspective, we need to have very clear what we talk about here. And today we are talking about market entries. The thing here is that, as I said, it depends. And if we want to talk about how to do internationalization, that depends heavily on the type of internationalization you choose. If you do the simple way of purchasing or selling goods, B2B goods, to another country, that is a completely different approach than we have if we do an actual market entry in another country. And then from a legal perspective, I think it is even more complicated, because all of these things I mentioned overlap a little bit. You could do a market entry in another country because you want to sell there, but you could also do it without doing the full market entry. You could do, and that would be the part here that doesn't overlap. You could do a simple sale of goods to another country, just cross-border B2B sales. Or it might be necessary to do a partnership with local entities, because, as you mentioned, China is a good example. Sometimes it's simply not possible to just sell. It might be necessary to partner up with local entities, with agencies, local agencies, commercial agencies, or distributors, or whatever. So it heavily depends on what you want to do, and it always depends on the goal you have, and from there on you choose your method on how you want to proceed. And then, of course, we are talking today about internationalization, and we are talking about outbound internationalization. But then inbound or outbound, one person's inbound is another person's outbound. I think Shakespeare never said that, but it sounds good from my when I drew up these slides. So inbound and outbound is always a question of perspective, and while from a commercial point of view we can conclude some things that you said in your slides, Mario. From a legal perspective, it is simply not possible to talk about outbound internationalization generally, but we always need to talk about outbound internationalization from a certain perspective. My perspective is always the German one. Sorry, but I cannot change that because I've never been a lawyer in Colombia, in Canada, or in South Africa. I've always been a German lawyer. So when I advise clients, I advise them to do outbound internationalization, outbound market entries from Germany to another country, or I advise clients from abroad, usually always with a partner, meaning with a lawyer that I know from abroad, to do inbound market entries in Germany. But it always has my perspective in it. I will not be able to advise in a inbound market entry in Canada without having local partners there. So actually what I said in the last 3 or 4 minutes is that it is very complicated and that is very complex, and that I cannot say general things about this topic from a legal perspective. But then when time is limited, and time is limited because we have said that we're going to speak 45 minutes and maybe a little more, but if I wanted to talk about that broadly, I could talk about that for days and days to go more into detail. But when time is limited, we have to focus. And if we focus from a legal perspective, that would be my top 5 takeaways, top 5 learnings for market entry. And then actually in both directions, both outbound Germany and inbound in another country, but from a German perspective. Firstly, and I think that is something that you also insinuated, Mario, your home turf is always your starting point. So you always have to start from your perspective, from the country you are starting off. And that is utterly important, because I think that I would always advise to partner up at home, meaning to choose your advisors at home, not to go abroad, and to choose your advisors directly there. But I think it would be always good to have someone who advises you already at home, someone you have already built trust with, who you could trust, who you have confidence in, and then that person should bring his or her network, because you simply don't have one. Usually, what you would do is, from a German perspective, if a German company would do a market entry in, let's say, Vietnam, they would not Google lawyer Vietnam and call them. If anyone here is of any other opinion, just tell me, but that usually wouldn't happen. So what you would usually want is you would probably choose your local trusted advisor, your local lawyer or business advisor, and then choose your and then let them choose the local advisors, because they might much rather know people from there, because an international acting lawyer would usually be engaged in some kind of network. We, for instance, here at Buse, we are in the so-called TELFA network, Trans-European Law Firm Alliance, and that network has, at least in all European, not only EU, but European countries, a partner law firm. And apart from that, we have partner firms in the US, and then it just stretches along across the globe. So that would be my advice. Definitely choose your advisors here and let them choose their advisors or their counterpart abroad. And then lastly, this is probably not something very legal, but as we lawyers are very known to be very strategically thinking, we should have a schedule and plan the time necessary, because especially from a legal perspective, you should always be prepared that certain tasks along the way just take their time. That is rather a little bit generally speaking about the legal perspective to do market entries abroad. But then to become a little more technical, because that is likely what you would expect from me. And as I wrote here, beware, because this is really heavy stuff. This is not something that you should tackle on your own, but to make you a little more aware of what probably legal challenges could be. I think, and this is also something that I very much liked about the slide that you had, Mario, where you said that you could possibly start a test balloon in a simple country, so to say, and then go to another country that is a little more complicated. You should choose where to do your market entry, because as we probably all know, in the EU, it would be a little more, it would be not a little, it would be a lot easier than somewhere else across the globe. Maybe Switzerland, even though if it's not part of the customs union, it's in the ECA. So that would be a little comparable, but then of course, doing a market entry in the EU in another country is comparably easier than going to China or Vietnam or South Africa. I think that is very obvious. And then you should think about a legal question that is not so obvious. You should always think about if you want to really do it yourself, because across the globe there are commercial agents, in German for the German audience, Handelsvertreter. Commercial agents are the ones that are doing that are basically doing the connecting, the promoting of your goods there, but then we revert to you and say, okay, you conclude the contract, you sell your goods. That's especially convenient for the sale of very valuable big goods like machines. And then you can also do through distributors. Distributors are a little more convenient for maybe consumer goods that are sold at the wholesale level. But that is always something that you should consider, because maybe an agent or a distributor could be an option rather than doing it on your own. But if then you choose to do the full market entry on your own and not through agents or distributors, you should of course think about the corporate setup, which is definitely key. We could talk about this for hours and days, but then eventually this is not going to give you a lot of insights, because eventually that's going to be the task of a corporate lawyer on ground in this country. But corporate setup, of course, is key, and then you have to consider tax implications. Everyone knows here in Germany that, at least, but it's the same across the globe, that corporate law is very closely connected to tax law. And if you choose your corporate setup wisely, you will also have very positive tax implications. And then surely you have to consider employment law and compliance and everything else. And as Mario mentioned, of course, stuff like IP and so on. Yeah, and that would be already everything from my side. I spoke maybe a little quicker because we plan to do this around 45 minutes or so. But if there are any questions, then of course everyone here is warmly invited to ask them. If not, I give back to you, Mario.
Thank you. I was just checking the chat, so just one person had to step out already. And yeah, we will be happy to take questions. So if someone wants to speak up, so you just could advise and raise your hand or unmute your microphone, and we will be happy to take your question. So otherwise, I will just have a short question to you, Johannes. So I think also from a perspective from now, as we know, with German businesses, we try to do, or we like to do the things quite methodic, with a clear methodology, whilst in other countries, business partners do not see contracts as very important. They say, okay, business is just based on relations, and contracts are not very important. So how do you advise your customers whenever they come in such a situation in international business?
Well, in principle, it would be the advice that I emphasize or underline always the most. You need to speak with local people. You need to have local advisors, because I will not be in a position to advise you on intercultural differences between Germany and Colombia, even Canada, US. Of course, we have a little knowledge about that if we work on an international level, but eventually it's not possible without knowing the people there in that country you are aiming at. But then, of course, it is true what you say. There are huge intercultural differences. If from a German perspective, you are pointing at the clauses in that contract that says whatever, it might not have the same effect if you're talking to a Chinese business partner or Australian or Colombian business partner, because that person might have a different understanding. And that is not really something that we should point fingers at, because it's just cultural differences. Somewhere that contract is a thing that has to be seen absolutely binding, and you have to comply with the clause, and you have to comply and know all the court judgments that have been made in relation to that clause. But then in another country, that contract and that clause is really much more of a memorandum of understanding. So so what your principal is saying by concluding that contract is we want to work together, and if we have problems, we're going to speak about that. And I'm not the one to judge that and saying the one or the other is better, but I think that you just have to know it, and you have to know how to work with it. What's your take to that? What would you say? How would you advise your clients?
I think it's always a challenge to make business development, to align goals in business development and align goals in legal security of the business you are undergoing. I've seen several cases where, let's say, it would have made sense from a commercial and business perspective to do a deal, whilst there was substantial legal risks in doing the business. And so how do you decide? So normally, of course, a company wants to earn money, and so of course sometimes there's the tendency to perhaps accept some kind of legal risks in order to make the business happen, whilst in the long run, then of course you might face problems which were already anticipated by your legal department. So I think there's always the decision. I've seen this in several occasions. What is most important, the business or the legal perspective? And I think then it's very important to find proactive lawyers, which also not just block the situation, so they also try to overcome it and try to line out alternatives, knowing that there might be risks associated, but I'll say, okay, if we do this, and if at least we could assure this, we could mitigate some of the risks, not all of the risks. And so I think it's in international business, it is difficult to eliminate all the risks. So there will always be risks. And so I think also from a legal perspective, I think companies have to learn that some risks might remain if you want to do international business.
Exactly. I would absolutely agree to that. And that might already be the conclusion here from a legal perspective. And what's always very important for me to emphasize is that the legal perspective needs to be one of the perspectives in taking commercial decisions, but not necessarily the decisive. We're not talking about compliance legal considerations. We're not talking about bribery. We're not talking about I don't know, committing violence incidents to conclude your commercial goals. That's not the thing I'm talking about here, but I'm talking about, okay, that might be a risk here. We have identified it. Thank you. And now we have to see how much we value that. What's the value of that risk? What's the commercial number we are putting on that risk? And are we willing to take that or not? The least thing, or the last thing you would want to have is a lawyer that is not going to talk with you about possible risks that could surge, because then he would be the messenger that is shot because you don't want to hear about that risk. That's not a good thing. But eventually you would want to talk about risks. You would want to have the full picture, and then you take commercial decisions. And as you said, all business is eventually risk-taking, and deal with it or just don't. But that is especially true with internationalization and market entries.